you. Welcome. I'm Joseph Phillips. This is Numinous. And we're really happy to be back at Roulette. Our last time was in October of 2018. And I didn't mean for us to be that long before we played again, but in between that time we had recorded an album. Just before the pandemic, we finished the recording sessions, and so of course we all know what happened in 2020, and we until now we're here. So this concert has actually kind of been in a long-term something I wanted to do back in 2020 when I was finishing up the recording sessions and then starting to mix, and then the pandemic happened. And then the social justice protests started to happen with George Floyd. I kind of was thinking about how, as all sorts of organizations were thinking about giving back or what they can do for their, to promote social justice, I started thinking for myself, what could I do? And so one thing I wanted to do, I thought, is I have this resource in Numinous, and I remember as being a young composer, having there's many opportunities to play sort of chamber, have your works played by chamber musicians, but I wanted to do something to sort of, for black composers to play larger works. So that was kind of the initial idea of what I call the Numinous Initiative, where I would play music by black composers, large ensemble music. So that was one part of this, what you see tonight. And the other part was during that time of my recording the album, I had put out a call for scores, basically, that's what it was, and that I would play your music. And so a bunch of people replied, and of course when the pandemic happened and just all of the sort of things that happened trying to get through the pandemic, the concert got pushed, or what I wanted, the performance got pushed back and back and back, and so until today. So some of the people who did wanted to initially do the call for scores did not, but of course our four composers tonight stuck with me as I figured out how to do this, and so we'll be having their pieces performed. So those are the two things you'll hear on the first half, and then on the second half, which I'll talk more about, is some scenes from one of the operas that I'm doing from my 1619 cycle. So what we're going to do is we're going to play 4 pieces on the first half of the concert. And now Numinous, just before I bring up George here, Numinous is my group, and I've started the group to play my music. And Numinous has this is the second time we've ever played someone other than me. And the first time was back 10 years ago. We played the Ecstatic Music Festival, and I was collaborating with composer, vocalist Amani Uzuri. So we played some of her music and some of my, which turned out to be my third album, Changing Same. So that was the first time we ever played someone music other than mine. And tonight we have a great opportunity to play 4 wonderful pieces by 4 great composers. So I'm gonna bring up the first one tonight that you'll hear tonight, and George Brennan. So.
I'm going to speak from here because I have trouble getting around, as you can see. My piece is called Introduction, Litany, and Prayers, and it has 4 parts to it. The introduction is basically getting to know you. The litanies are a bunch of solo statements that are from the place where we all are, actually. They reflect the vastness, the emptiness that surrounds this world, even though it's full of other worlds. So each of these is a little singular statement made by the instrumentalists. The prayers are 2. The first is a prayer for good things, all the kinds of things people want in life. They want happiness, they want health, they want prosperity, and this prayer talks about that. The second prayer is a prayer for protection. It's based on an ancient source of wisdom from West Africa called Ifa. follows a set of divination texts which people use to foretell the future. The interesting thing about a source like this, ancient as it is, it's always news. It always not only foretells events that occurred, events that are happening now, and also events that will happen in the future. This prayer is adapted by me from one of the divination outcomes that Ifa is composed of, and that's mentioned in the text. The text is directed towards Osameji, which is one of the outcomes of divination for Ifa. And Osameji is a heavy spirit. He's brilliant, shining. He knows everything that's ever happened and everything that's going to happen. But he has a warning. All the good things that people pray for, some of them can be taken to extremes, particularly the pursuit of wealth. If that's taken too far, everything goes out of balance, and the earth can be destroyed by that. And it's a plea that that should not happen to us.
composer is Bob Goldberg, and we're going to bring him up here to say a few words about. There he is. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to see so many, some familiar faces and so many interested faces. I'm really honored to be here in the presence of such a wonderful group of composers and such interesting music, and to hear such a wonderful group of musicians performing my composition. Thank you, Joe and Numinous, for putting this together. So this piece is called Dream Sequence. It was originally written for an accordion ensemble, and when I was offered the chance to write something for Numinous, I decided to orchestrate it and recompose it a little bit. It changed quite a bit in the process. The piece is constructed of melodic and rhythmic patterns which are layered on top of each other. It does not have any narrative content, unless, of course, you would like to apply your own. It's mostly in the key of G, and if you like, I invite you to close your eyes and dream your own dream with it. Thanks.
next piece will be by Steven Swartz, and there it is. Okay.
Hello, everyone. My piece is called Any Minute Now, and as you can probably tell from the title, it is a piece about waiting. And this is the third piece that I wrote during the pandemic, and really, it's really about the different experiences that people had of waiting during that time. And then there were also those who didn't have the luxury of waiting and who enabled the rest of us to wait. The two panels that constitute this piece sort of represent the different ways that time passed during the pandemic. The first panel is sort of yearning and expectant, and the second is kind of suspended and tremulous, a sort of non-linear time. And there are waves of hope that recede and swell, and false starts and false endings, and all those things that we shared during those years. This piece is dedicated to my wife, Christy, a frontline hospital worker, and to all who made it possible for the rest of us to wait. It's painful to look back on those times, but all too easy to forget the people who risked and in some cases sacrificed their lives so our lives could go on. So this is for you. Thank you, Joe, for the opportunity to write for this incredible ensemble and to share the program with such outstanding composers. And thank you all for being here and for listening.
Okay, before we do the last tune, just let you know, we are going to take a very short intermission, maybe about 10 minutes or so. So just get ready, and then for the second half. The second half is shorter than the first half, so you can stick around. Plus, it's the opera. I think you want to hear what's going to happen. Before I bring up Anthony, just so you know that if I don't get a chance to say this, so the musicians are all working musicians. They're all doing their own things, and they have their own groups. So you have their names. And many of them have their own recordings and CDs and play with other groups. So I would definitely check out what they're doing. Please maybe look at something like Bandcamp if you want to buy their merchandise. That goes directly to them. Or certainly check out their website, and some of them have things that you can buy and check out their music online. So I wanted to say that. So for this last piece in the first half, I want to bring up Anthony Branker. Where's Anthony? There he is. There you go.
Good evening, everyone. How are you guys doing? Good, good. It's just this wonderful set of brilliant music by these wonderful composers and this incredible ensemble. So give them a hand. The composition you're going to hear, The Door of No Return, is actually the opening movement of an extended work that I created that's titled What Place Can Be For Us, a suite in 10 movements. The creation of this particular movement was inspired by a photo image that I saw in the New York Times that dates back to June of 2013. And it was when then President Barack Obama had visited Senegal's Gorée Island and visited the Door of No Return there. But it's important to note that this was one of several sites that was known by that name. This was a location where Africans were placed into bondage, led onto ships as slaves, and destined for the New World Americas. So the composition and the text by Brazilian writer Beatriz Esmer is essentially my attempt to chronicle the journey and settlement of Africans in the Americas. This particular movement itself is divided into 4 movements. The first is in and out of step, followed by prayer to the orishas. Next is the middle passage, and finally, dance of the diasporic spirits. The entire suite that this comes from has been recorded by a jazz octet, so a very different instrumentation from Numinous, and that is available, by Bandcamp. And I have some in my bag. But anyway, we hope you enjoy this, and thank you, Joe, once again for allowing me to be part of this.
Where am I? What hands are these that pulled us out our land? What language is this that hurt our souls? The sound of whips cuts the soul. The scourge, the gag, the pain screams, Mother Africa. The sorrow that never ends. Wake up your orishas, mother. Wake up your children. this endless nightmare. Get us out this door. Pulled us out our land. What language is this that hurts our soul? The scourge, the gag, the pain screams Mother Africa. The sob that never ends. Wake up your Orishas, mother. Wake up your children. Get us out this endless nightmare. Get us out this door. Oh, ah, oh, eh, ah, oh. Oh, ah, oh, eh, ah, oh. Oh, ah, oh, eh, ah, oh. Locked us in the holds of filthy ships, made us hungry. Our women and children thrown overboard. Their bitter tears mixed with the salt of water, of the water of the four seas. No mercy. No future. Where is this door? Where did our dreams go? What lands are these? Freedom, spread your wings over us. the Nago, Yoruba, Malays nations. Open the doors for your nations. Don't let our story be forgotten, nor allow our dreams to die. Freedom, spread your wings over us. Open the doors for your nations. Don't let our story be forgotten, nor allow our dreams to die.
Finish it out. Thank you. very exciting for me, and hopefully for you to hear this. This has been a long kind of gestating project that I've been thinking about. My initial thoughts about this, what you're about to hear, came, I guess it was about 2018, 19, after the Gray Land had premiered, but before we had gone into the studio, and so I was just kind of thinking about what's the next thing, and initially I was thinking of writing an opera based on the case for reparations, the Ta-Nehisi Coates' article from the Atlantic. So I was kind of processing that a little bit and thinking about it, and then the 1619 project came out in 2019. So when I read that, there was some very similarities to that, to the Atlantic article. So I sort of changed my focus and thought, okay, I will write an opera about that. And my initial thought was, I'll write one opera. I can fit all of that in one opera. And the more I started to think about it and research it, it just kind of didn't feel right to do that. And so that kind of spread to thinking about this project as a cycle. And sometime when I was starting to think about like that, I started to read the Alex Ross book, about Wagnerism, and so I was thinking about that and how Wagner's cycle. I mean, I'm not that egotistical, but my thoughts were like, well, I think this could be something that's very important and can be something that will fit my artistic thoughts, but also something that would be sort of something that could be useful and artistic for the opera community. So that's kind of how the beginnings of this opera cycle started. And my initial thought was, as I mentioned, I was the case for reparations. In that article, there was a piece about sort of housing. So I started thinking, that was my first initial, okay, I'm gonna think about something to do with housing. And I had already, in my reading, even before the Gray Land, was learning about sundown towns. And of course now, this summer, I think it was, that country guy had the song. And so a lot of people started thinking about this and talking about this, and like, whoa, I'd never heard of this before, so this initial idea of sundown towns, of being a place where blacks would not be able to live or not be able to go, it depended, and it depended on where in the country. It wasn't necessarily blacks. It could have been Mexican, could have been Chinese, it could have been Indian, sometimes it was Jews. But there were all, the initial ideas, but they could not stay in this town, whether it's live, whether it's, sometimes they could go to the town and work, but they have to leave after a certain time. So this idea got me reading about different things. And so there's a book by Dr. James Lowen, called Sundown Towns. And in this book, it was about many, many things. And one of the initial thoughts that I had was, or that I read in the book, was that sundown towns generally were not in the South, which you would think they weren't. South had their own problems, but the sundown towns were not necessarily in the South. They're mostly in the Midwest, Midwest. And so the legacy of sundown towns is actually still today. So this has brought me to thinking about the subject of the opera. So another thought was to bring this opera, to think about this particular opera, was there's something called the Red Summer. Some of you might have heard about this, but this was in about 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, summer of 1919, where there were multiple race riots, and they all happened in various ways and for various reasons. Sometimes there was no reason; they just want to get rid of the blacks, and sometimes it was some trumped up something. So I knew two things. I knew before I started this, it would be something to do with housing. It would be based something to do with the Red Summer, and initially with the sundown towns. Now, this Red Summer in 1919. Sorry, I don't mean to be doing a history lesson, but the summer of 1919, in the Red Summer, there was multiple people who got kicked out of their house or towns. And so it wasn't just, of course, it wasn't just in 1919. It happened many times before, many times after, where, again, some reason and it's usually a violent exodus. And that we all know now about Tulsa, but Tulsa was not the only place. And so it was another riot in 1917 in East St. Louis. And I'm going to show you a picture. This is you can put it up now. So this was the initial, I saw this this is from September 1917 issue of The Crisis. The Crisis is a magazine from the NAACP. And this lady, that issue, the September 1917, was talking about the East St. Louis race riots. So this picture just struck to me because you can't quite see it there, but at the bottom there it says, this is a picture of a woman who was a survivor. And it said, Narcisse Gurley, 71, come next birthday, lived in her home for 30 years and afraid to come out until the blazing walls fell in. That last part got me thinking about, well, what would it have been like to be in this house when people came to burn your house, and she didn't want to go out at all until the walls fell in. So that was kind of my initial, that got me thinking about this particular opera in another way. And also that book that I mentioned, the James Lowen book, and Sundown, the kind of kernel that got me really moving onto the opera was, it talked about how, the towns were exodus of blacks or Jews or Mexican or whatever. But in the book, he mentioned sometimes they would let a family or two or something stay in the town. And so that got me thinking, well, what would it be like if you were one of those black families living in this sundown town where everyone else has to leave or everyone else doesn't want blacks in the town, but you can stay? What would it be like? So that was kind of the initial, got me moving to this opera, which is called So Far Behind Now Because of Then. So what we're going to do today, you're going to hear a few excerpts from this opera, and I'm going to bring up Rebecca L. Hargrove. So I'm going to kind of set the scene for each, because you're not going to see that, you don't know, this is just a few excerpts from the opera. So I'm going to set what's happening before, and then we'll play what's the excerpt. So this thing that we're going to hear is, this is the actual opening of the opera. Now, initially I had written music to underscore this narration, and then I just thought, well, it works better without the music because, Rebecca's a triple threat, model, actress, singer, opera singer. So I was like, well, I'm going to utilize that talent and so have her actually sort of have a monologue with this. So the piece is called the North Star, and Rebecca's character in the opera is, it's based in a town a fictional town, outside of Chicago in 1949, excuse me. Now Rebecca is a survivor from that Red Summer in her town in Mississippi. So what you're going to hear right now is her remembering her the things that she heard when she was she was 9 in 1919. The things she remembers and heard in 1919, that people were talking about the North. This North was not, people would go to the North, and then they thought this was the promised land, and then people would come back to the south, you know, like on vacation or whatever, and talk about this magical land, or, you know, this place where you can have money, and they will come back with fancy cars, or, you know, nice clothes or whatever. So this is Rebecca in the North Stars, her kind of remembering the things that she that people were saying back in when she was 9, and about the North. So this is the North Star.
I didn't believe them. Nothing made sense. We were just surviving in fear and whisper, while they were myth and legend become living present. They arrive from places somewhere over the horizon, but forever out of our sight. Come from other large, unknowable worlds beyond our small, restless one. I couldn't believe them. Their cars were too shiny, their heads too proud, their tails too tall. It just didn't seem real. And yet, there they were, filling the pews of the mother churches on Easter Sunday, where we all strained to get a glimpse of these northern lords, just to see if there was still any of the old South left in Lila Mae or Lil Boo Boo. They gathered on the summer porches after the dinner that Mama and Grandmama and Auntie B spent weeks planning, and days stoking the stove, pots boiling over with savory aromas in anticipation of their return. Fried chicken, chitlins, collard greens, and black-eyed peas. A gluttonous reminder to them and us that down home could be just as good. We all sat with our protuberant bellies, listening to these pontiffs preaching in an impenetrable religion that was too far away from us to know. Yet, they were here, speaking their words pregnant with impossible possibles. Chicago, New York, D.C., Detroit, Los Angeles. Words of a foreign language immigrating from places strange, where money falls out of pockets stuffed with opportunities. Places where one can eat where you like, walk where you want, and talk as you feel. Lives filled with respect. Lives lived as one wishes. They would spin those tales in that alien tongue, and the old folks would only translate it as nothing but risk and foolishness. It ain't so bad here, is it? They'd ask. But to the unbowed, those northernly words were the glistening music of wonder from the promised land they always prayed to hear someday. Effulgent sounds that planted seeds of want, of dreams, of hopes, with all the problems here and somewhere else out there. Why would anyone want to stay? Was always the reply. But I never wanted to believe their stories. I was a happy kid then. What's wrong with here, I would think. So I didn't really listen. Or so I thought. Until the day the world changed. Then I could finally see the slowly suffocating curtain enveloping the same air, water, and earth that was always there, that I always lived behind. It was then I finally could hear the echoes of the ancestors' voices in those northern potentates and prophets, what they were trying to say. Because I now believe those ancient guides were within me, and I began to listen.
So what happens right after this is Rebecca is, and this is the piece we're going to do, part of the piece that we're going to do, is she's going to be talking about what happened that day, the day that everything changed was the day that the white mob came to her town. And she was 9 years old, and her parents kind of leave her, let her go, tell her to go to the house, and then they kind of go. A lot of times when we talk about the violence that was put upon black communities, sometimes there's a narrative of they didn't really fight back. Well, many of them did fight back. And in this case, in this opera, her parents are going to fight back for their home. But of course, this will be the last time that she actually sees her parents. So her parents tell her to go to the house. She goes in the house and locks the door. And we get to this point where in the opera, she is going to recount what that was like being in the house once they burnt her house. So that's why this scene is called Afraid to Come Out Till the Blazing Walls Fell In. In the opera, she's recounting this, and we won't know this until Act 1, Scene 1 starts, but she's actually recounting this from the distance from 1949. She's actually talking to her husband about this experience of what it was like being in the house. So this is from the prologue, Afraid to Come Out Till the Blazing Walls Fell In. next one is Rebecca's character, as I mentioned, she's from this Mississippi town, and Ariadne, where she is, over there, there she is. Someone come on up. All right. And yes. Both of them are actually from the same town in Mississippi, and they're actually also together in Chicago. They know each other outside of Chicago years later. But when they were growing up, they were roughly the same age. Sarah, which is Rebecca's character, and Patricia, which is Ariadne's character, they would play often. Sometimes they would go, like they would get taken to, Patricia would go to church with Sarah and her family sometimes. And so, again, they're both from this same town in Mississippi at the beginning of the century, or early in the 20th century. So, of course, they're going to have different recollections of living in that town. And for Patricia, it's this beautiful, nostalgic, kind of wonderful childhood of the South. And for Sarah, it's something completely different. So they're going to be singing a little bit about their experiences. At the beginning of the scene, though, what's happening is in this town in Chicago, Sarah, Rebecca's character, is kind of the one reason she is in this sundown town is she's like the laundress for the town, and people come and bring their laundry to her. So that's one of the reasons they let their family stay. So, and Patricia is kind of a well-to-do family in this town. Actually, her husband, he's not in the opera, but he gets mentioned a little bit. He's actually the president of the bank in Chicago, so he goes, the First National Bank in Chicago, so he goes up to Chicago quite often and takes the Illinois Central and rides up to Chicago. So at the beginning of the scene, they are actually, Patricia has brought her laundry to Sarah, and then they just kind of start talking a little bit about, initially at the beginning, they talk about, and this is one you won't hear tonight, but they are talking about going to church with, Patricia's talking about going to church with Rebecca's family, and that's actually kind of, there's a little bit before that, but then we start this remembrance of, it was such a beautiful time, and that's what you're going to hear with Patricia, Ariadne's character initially, and then it goes on and talks about their experiences. They have basically the same thing, but just from two different perspectives. So. So the next, I'm not going to recount the whole opera. So you're just whenever it's produced somewhere, you can come and see it, and you can see what the whole story is. But this next part is from Act. It's at the end, toward the end, Act 2, Scene 3. Initially, what you're going to see is my thoughts were, it was actually at the beginning, but during the course of writing, of course, I wrote the words, and then I composed the music, and then I started to think about certain things. And so even before we even had a reading, I kind of rearranged some things, and I thought it should be, what you're going to see, which should be toward the end. So at the end, toward the end, things kind of come full circle. So Rebecca's character in 1949 is there's another white mob that comes to her town and actually it's just before this scene. It's actually through her husband. Her husband is he was actually talking. So let me say this before I say my next thing, is that one thing that I thought about in this opera is that and I've read something or saw a video of this guy talking about, I'm not exactly sure what he was talking about, but the thing I got, he was talking about racism, but the thing that I got from this video was that he said racism can kind of tap you on the shoulder at any moment, at moments that you didn't expect. And so I thought, that's quite true, being as a black American in the United States. At any moment, you could just be walking down the street. As we know, over the last few years, things can happen, and you thought everything was great, and the next thing you know, you're in jail or worse. So Rebecca's character's husband is actually just coming from work in the Illinois Central. He sees Patricia, which he knows because Patricia's character, Patricia helped them move to this town. And so they were just talking, friendly talk, nothing more than that. It was very brief. But there was a policeman who saw this black man talking to this white woman, and maybe getting a little, in his imagination, too friendly. And so basically they take him and put him in jail, and then this you don't see, but he is killed. So the town, and this often happens, this is in some of the researches, there's something that happens in the town, whether it's imagined or real, and then all the other people are like, we need to get rid of everyone. And so that's what kind of happens. And so that's how we find Rebecca's character in her house being burned, kind of coming full circle. So the thing you're going to see, it's a video, and I did this in 2020 during the middle of the pandemic. I had gotten a Brooklyn Arts Council grant to sort of start the writing of the opera, and of course this was the middle of the pandemic, so we could not do anything. So I had to do this over Zoom. So as you can see, this is Zoom, as we all remember. And so what these, I had a friend, actually her in the blue up there, that was a neighbor. So she's an actress, and you probably have heard her voice on many commercials. So I helped get some actors to help me read this scene. So it's called the Founders Chorus, and this is what they're kind of saying this just before they're going to finish torching the house. So it's called the Founders Chorus.
God made every race live on the face of the earth.
He has given each their time and each their place. This is our time. This is our place. It's our right. We founded this land for us. You are.
You are heathens, the wretched and wicked, the leeches, the depraved and brutes. You have nothing. You are nothing.
We own the businesses, have the money and the power. We are the government. The law.
The police?
We are fine people, righteous people, God's people.
The proud.
The sovereign.
We are America.
Who do you think you are?
Are.
We are the Knights, the Minutemen, the League, Red Shirts, and Redeemers.
Union. Association. Legion and posse.
Boogaloos and the Nation, the 3% and keepers of the faith.
We are history and future.
Who do you think you are?
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 You are? Who do you think you are? Who do you think
you are? You are!
So that's what happens is that scene is played out, and then they torch her place, and she gets to she perishes, but there's a sort of a hopeful thing because she does not perish in a way, because her descendants come and bring from wherever and take her away, and so there's that hope that even though she has her descendants who live on, and all of the things that she taught them are within them. And there's actually a last little epilogue in the opera. So again, this is all about housing. So at the very end, there's a scene where her children, are in 1968, are watching the Fair Housing Act signing by President Johnson. And I kind of modified the speech that he did. But that's kind of how the opera ends, so that it brings this hopeful, supposedly hopeful, with the signing that this kind of stuff that you see with the sundown towns and discrimination wouldn't happen. And it's a great idea, but as we know, the reality is a little less. It's not the ideal. So before we do the last thing, I just want to say this is just one opera of the cycle, as I mentioned at the beginning. There are multiple operas in the even though the 1619 project is sort of the initial thought. It's not the 1619, but it's its own. This is its own theme. I'm very inspired by what Nicole Hannah Jones did with the project and the idea of reframing history. And of course, we know today. I mean, if you know the Founders Chorus, you could probably say, I bet in January 6th, that was it's probably something they were probably saying. And this was written, before that. So I think the idea that this project, it is about history. It is about, and one thing I read is that it was something that, all of this stuff about, we shouldn't feel bad about history, or we shouldn't want people to feel guilty about certain things in history. But history is what we need to know to improve and to make ourselves better. The ideals of America. They're beautiful ideas if, just as Martin Luther King said, if we just want them to do the things they said on paper, then things they'd be fine. So if the ideals of America are sort of this beauty of equality, and then it hasn't reached that goal, and it's far from that. But that doesn't mean people who are critical of it are any less hopeful that it can include them or others. So the operas themselves, they are yes, based on history. There are 8 at the moment, and most of them are actually laid out. So I already have. I'm working on the second one as we speak. It'll be based in the Reconstruction period of the country, and an intersection between Black and Indigenous and Mexican rights, freedoms. The third one is sort of, I already have that. I'm not going to tell you my whole plans because they're plans, so I don't want to say anything until they're there. But the third one is already, it'll be kind of based in the pre-antebellum period, and it'll be based in the South, in Charleston is part of one of the places. I'm writing most of the librettos, but I do have two that I've decided to get some other writers to write the libretto. Of course, I'll still write the music. So one of the operas is based on, there's a book called Masterless Men by Dr. Carrie Lee Merritt, which is about the plight of the poor whites during the antebellum period and how they actually do have common cause with the free blacks and slaves. So that's one that, and sort of the idea of education. So all of the themes are, they're various themes that I feel throughout the history of the United States that are kind of constant. And so each opera will depict something from those periods, those themes, and from 1619 to, actually it goes into the future too. So if you're interested in what I'm doing, hopefully you are, hopefully there will be chances to see these productions at some point. But this is, I feel like it's something, today where people are questioning history and not wanting to say this is what, these things happened, or trying to make you feel good about it. And again, like I said, it doesn't mean, to me, it doesn't feel like, how can you know, this is what I was going to say earlier. There's something from John Steinbeck in The Grapes of Wrath. He said something like, how can we know who we are if we don't remember our past? Basically, that's the basic saying. So if we're going to be shy away from who we were or are, then how can we actually improve? So that's one of my goals with these cycles, these operas in the cycle. So this last little scene is very short. Actually comes at the end, toward the end of Act 1, Scene 3. And this is Rebecca's character, Sarah, who is, again, it's that racism tapping you on the shoulder. So they're in a town, they're having a good time, something happens with their family. And so Rebecca is, after this incident, she's just kind of praying to the Lord to help her family. And actually her husband is a non-believer. And so he's basically, at the end, he says, there's no one who's going to help us. So that's kind of how that scene ends. Now, before I do this, in the sundown towns, we mentioned that there was, they didn't allow blacks, or sometimes they had to leave. So sometimes in these towns, there would be a bell or a horn or something to announce when that time is for the blacks to leave. And, usually be about 6 o'clock or whatever. I think it was a year ago or 2 years ago, I saw this article about this town in Nevada. I had already written this, but I saw this article, and it was talking about how this little town had this kind of dinner bell that rang every day at 6. I was like, ding, oh, that's so cute. There's a little dinner bell. Oh. But the history of that bell is actually, it's a sundown bell telling, probably most likely it was Mexican, since it was in Nevada, most likely telling Mexicans to leave the town. So this kind of stuff that you think, is just this cute thing, or it's still with us. Basically, that's kind of the point. All of these things, the history is still with us. Even if you want to say the sundown towns, some of the towns that are mostly all white, I shouldn't say most. A lot of the towns that are all white, they might not have been sundown towns. They might have not been, but some of them were, and some of them are still white, 95% white, because the legacy of the sundown towns. And sometimes some of these towns actually had a large black population, or Mexican, and they were kicked out. So that whole idea of that there was a riot is gone, and it's just so that history is gone. And so in this one you're going to hear, there'll be at the very end. That's the sundown. You'll hear the sundown bell. So I want to, first of all, thank you for coming. I want to thank Roulette for having us. They've been a sort of a big supporter over the years of being here, so I'm appreciative of Roulette giving us an opportunity to have this concert tonight. And I want to thank all of the composers who stayed with me to make this happen. And of course, I always thank the musicians because, you know, I write what I write, and I can imagine it. I had been imagining this for 2 years, so it's been in my brain. But until they actually played it and sang it, it wasn't, to me, it wasn't like alive. So I'm always very thankful, and I want to thank the musicians for giving the opportunity to play my music and be with me also in this journey of the 1619 opera cycle. So this last little bit is again the sort of a kind of a hopeful prayer for Rebecca's character Sarah about giving them hope in this trying times. So I want to thank you again for having us, and hopefully we will see you when it's produced. Thank you. Thank you.